Defined by Merriam-Webster as popular music originating from or influenced by non-Western musical traditions and often having a danceable rhythm, the exotic allure of world music has fascinated the eyes and ears of audiences since the early 20th century. As the first country in the world to adopt multiculturalism as a national policy, Canada stands as a global example of a nation readily embracing diversity. Thus, it seems fitting that a majority of Canadian post-secondary institutions include world music courses within their curricula, often not only exclusively for music majors, but students of other disciplines as well. Both the official multiculturalism policy enacted in 1971 and the Multiculturalism Act in 1982 attempt to promote and embrace the cultural, racial, and ethnic diversity of Canada. However, considering the educational institutions of this same country were founded solely from European educational traditions, it begs the question as to how these kinds of musics found their way into Canadian universities. Concerning world music in higher education, there are many questions that exist unanswered according to its place and purpose. What purpose do these courses serve in regards to curricular goals? Who are these courses for? And what exactly do they intend to teach? Looking deeper into these questions requires an examination of the origins of world music in higher education institutions in Canada. World music in the educational sphere came about along with the rise of an awareness of music as a non-universalism, as opposed to a universalism. Previous views of music as a universalism believed that the music of one culture somehow encompassed the music of any other culture, and thus Western European music was thought to have the universal value of music that all other styles of music should contain. Any music without these core values, including harmony, pitch, and scale, were considered from a music evolutionist view as incomplete or not developed enough. Thus, music outside Western culture lacking these elements were considered primitive. It was in the second half of the 20th century that scholars began to question this view. Bruno Nettle compiled the view of music as non-universalist in 1977. In 1953, after World War II, ISME, or the International Society for Music Education, was formed and recognized the importance of the dissemination of world music, and collaboration between ethnomusicologists, composers, and music educators began to flourish. A look at broadening music curricula was taken up by MENC, or the Music Educators National Conference, who organized and sponsored the influential Tanglewood Symposium in the summer of 1967. Upon the close of this symposium, members of the conference posited that music of all periods, styles, forms, and cultures had a place in the curricula. Though it may be overly ambitious to attempt to pinpoint the exact genesis of world music's place in higher education in Canada, two notable Canadian individuals are known to have devoted themselves to the advancement of world music and music education. Seen prominently in the report on the Music Means Harmony workshop in 1985, Canadian music educators Tim Rice and Patricia Shand, through a number of workshops and presentations, call attention to multiculturalism in the sphere of music education, pointing out the barriers of the inclusion of world music to Canadian curricula. Recognizing the increasing diversity of Canada, the workshop acted as an attempt to better equip teachers and students to deal with the multicultural realities of life in Canada through enhanced understanding of music of other cultures. Posing the resources as usable for both music educators and educators interested in the goals of multiculturalism, Rice and Shand stressed four important goals of their efforts. 1. Sharing musical experiences, preferably in action, such as singing, dancing, or playing in tradition. 2. Experiencing alternative cultural-specific methods of music education with an emphasis on oral methods. 3. Providing direct contact with bearers of these traditions, as opposed to acquiring knowledge through other media forms. And 4. Moving ethnic music outside the realm of exotic and performing arts, and into the realm of the familiar and participatory. Due to workshops such as these, multicultural and global curricular requirements have led to regularly offered world music courses at the university. An anecdotal standard seems to exist surrounding how these courses are structured and executed. Most often, they are taught by ethnomusicologists already employed within the institution. A specialist in a specific area of instruction, such as Ghanaian drumming or klezmer music, would most likely be the head of the ensemble, both in the structuring of the curricula as well as directing the group and evaluating them in their chosen form of assessment process, whether it be bi-weekly playing tests, class participation and attendance, or final performance. In his book, Performing Ethnomusicology, Ted Solis shares the more practical struggles ethnomusicologists and music educators face with the task of fitting themselves and world music ensembles within traditional academic frameworks. By and large, the instruction of these kinds of music, rather than being approached with care, are more often modified to fit within the predetermined canon of these institutions. According to Solis, the eternal challenge exists in mounting a substantial semesterly concert in the face of constant turnover and eternally green student musicians, with little or no prior exposure to either instruments or sound. Unfortunately, the seemingly inextricable nature of the music academy and the public performance makes it difficult to do away with final performances altogether. In observing the requirement of world music ensemble leaders in not only teaching music, but teaching technique on a new instrument, as opposed to Western art music ensembles where technique instruction is largely unheard of, Solis makes a distinction between the two academic ensemble schemas: canonic ensembles, which are Western art music ensembles such as choir, band, or orchestra, dedicated to musical matters rather than cultural contextualization, and experience ensembles, world music ensembles, whose goals are to provide students with a second cultural childhood, akin to the sort of entirely new musical experience most musicians underwent as children with their first piano lessons or sixth-grade band. Solis also touches on the issue of cultural encapsulation, which describes the tendency for the role of the culture bearer to represent the entirety of a culture. Though it is impossible to transmit culture without some deal of encapsulation, the inclusion of a culture bearer can quickly give an air of authenticity to an ensemble, and consequently to a performance as viewed by outsiders. Juliet Hess argues that these culture bearers can often bring more issues than solutions, and quickly perpetuate stereotypes. In her paper Performing Tolerance, she expresses that the expectation that a single culture bearer could represent an entire culture is unrealistic and unfortunately consistent with the way teachers engage with world music. This engagement with a stereotypical, racialized other, however, may not be as dangerous as the encounter with the imagined racialized other, which can occur with the absence of such culture bearers when students are forced to envision these culture bearers. This image, Hess argues, is always ready to be accessed, in turn allowing Canadian students to tolerate this other and, in turn, essentialize their culture. In general, speaking of the place of world music in the institution seems a rather precarious one. Although many music educators advocate for and stress the necessity of the inclusion into the curricula, on the opposite side, it is hard to see practical applications of these justifications. As far as is evident, there does not exist a mandate for the inclusion of world music at the post-secondary level, unlike the presence of other core ensembles or fundamental musical skills courses. Due to the lack of any overruling mandates, course instructors are largely responsible for structuring course content and establishing course goals, making these expectations inconsistent across ensembles. Calls to rethink the model of world music courses in the institution are plentiful, though often unattainable due to the constraints of academia, such as the high demand of student participation in core ensembles, availability of instructors and resources, and funding. One of the most cited grievances is concerning the duration of world music courses, which hinders student learning in a variety of ways. Not only is it unfeasible for students to learn the foreign technical skills that come with participating in world music ensembles in time for a decently presentable concert, but there is little on the level of critical thinking and reflection that can occur concurrently. Curriculum models proposed by David Elliott, taken from his article, Key Concepts in Multicultural Music Education, posit examples of proactive methods that can be applied to world music in Canadian universities. These models are especially applicable due to Elliott's specific attention to modeling them concerning music education in Canada. Elliott's dynamic model, the final model of 6 proposed, amends Western aesthetic concepts, technical terms, and musical metaphors used to develop student awareness of the features and practices of music in world cultures, and they are replaced with concepts original to the musical cultures being studied. It also encourages students to develop basic ideas about music from a bottom-up perspective, as opposed to top-down. As seen in the model, the arrows go in 2 directions, from concepts to various musics and back, and includes the widest possible range of world musics. Additionally, this dynamic model also offers the possibility of developing appreciations and new behavior patterns, not only in relation to world musics, but also in relation to world peoples. In regards to the struggles that accompany the inclusion of world music in the university, there may not be any concrete methods to alleviate them. Taking Elliott's dynamic model into account when considering the function of world music courses may offer some methods of better advocating for and justifying their place. For example, avoiding the imposition of institutionalized methods of testing onto the courses, such as written assignments, would encourage a deeper immersion into the culture being studied, as opposed to repositioning it within Western art music standards. Allowing these ensembles to obtain a more canonical status could also be achieved by permitting students to enroll in them for longer than a term or half-term, or minimizing the separation between canonic and other ensembles. As well, analyzing and reviewing course goals of world music ensembles would shed light on their importance altogether. There is little doubt that students come away from world music courses without having been influenced and impacted by them. It is equally as important for music educators to ensure that these impacts are not cloaked in caricatures of culture, and that there are conversations about what they are doing and why, and that understanding and respect follow as a result. Vedder, who believes in the use of world music ensembles to provoke, disrupt, and challenge complacency, makes a poignant observation. In the discourse about representation, using our rehearsals and performances as platforms for raising questions, and musical performances as spaces of dialogic encounter. In this way, we can make the ensemble encounters a part of a student's intellectual, personal, aesthetic, and ethical transformation. To summarize, it is through critical examination of these early journeys of music educators into the topic of world music that the framework upon which its modern-day inclusion is built becomes visible. All this to say, world music courses can and have make a world of a difference to the students that take part in them.